he is from China, and it's my pleasure to introduce him to you today. He was born in Jiangxi province, which is in the southeast part of China, with the Yangtze River in the north and mountains in the south. And he received his BA in history in Jiangxi Normal University in Nanchang, China. And then he received a PhD in economics from Jinan in Guangzhou, China, which is Guangzhou borders Hong Kong. So in Guangdong, he is a professor in Guangdong in the School of Economics and Management in South China Normal University. And he has held a position there since 2009 as associate professor. And Dr. Peng is an amazing researcher. He specializes in understanding migration and the impacts of migration on regional economies. This is an extremely important topic for China itself and has a lot of relevance, obviously, to other countries around the world. He has published numerous articles on the topics and 2 books. One book called the research on the spillover effects of regional economies in China, and the Ru-Yuan model, the development path of less developed minority regions in China. So he has given lectures across the country in China at some of the top universities there, and he's also, since he's been at Wayne State, started giving talks in the US at various places. Dr. Peng is a visiting professor here at Wayne State University. He'll be here 1 year. He is here with his 8-year-old daughter too, so he's taking care of an 8-year-old daughter while doing his research. He continues to do important work on migration, economics, and regional economies, and social issues in China. And it's really a pleasure to have him here working with him, because I also do work on migration in China, but I know many of you are interested in China topics about China, and I encourage you to take advantage of his presence here at Wayne State. Feel free to email him and set up a time to meet and talk. And in the meanwhile, please help me give him a warm welcome to his talk today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the sponsors for inviting me and offering me a good opportunity to communicate with the schools and the students from the Wayne State universities. The topic of my lecture is the effect of interregional migration on regional economic disparity in China from 1990s to 2005. My lectures include 5 parts. The first is introductions. Second is service of studies. The third is characteristic of labor migration in China. Part 4 is the empirical studies. The last is conclusions. Since the implementation of policy of reform and the Chinese opening up to the outside world, this policy is from 1978. There has been a massive migration from Chinese inland countryside to coastal cities. This has deeply changed Chinese economy development and social life, and has influenced regional economic disparity. This study looks at the effect of mass interregional migration on the economic gap across the province. It is asked if migration is narrowing or widening regional economic disparities. This question has been studied by many scholars. According to the traditional neoclassical economics, the main reasons of interregional migration is the gap in expected range across the regions, and the migration from the low-income regions to the high-income regions. will narrow the gap of ranges among the regions, which is an important source of regional economic convergence. Therefore, the aggregation for mutually beneficial is parallel improvement. Another approach is to use the theoretical framework of new economic geographies founded by programs. According to this theory, in the initial stage, the interregional aggregation will widen the gap because of accumulated effect. With the congestion cost becomes more and more, the spread effects will emerge, which will narrow the gap. Many Chinese scholars' empirical study shows that the interregional aggregation had widened the gap of Chinese regional economy. If this is the case, why hasn't interregional aggregation led to the regional economic convergence? China's hukou policy was thought to be an important factor. But my study had different results. The part C is the characteristics of labor aggregation in China. At first, we discussed the stages and the scale of Chinese aggregation. China is a country with a large population. There were about 1 billion people 30 years ago. And now there are more than 1.3 billion people. So China is a country with a rich human resource. Over the past 35 years, Chinese aggregation had passed through 5 stages. This is 5 stages. This table shows the 5 stages. Period 1 is from 1979 to 1983. Period 2 is from 1984 to 1992. Period 3 is from 1993 to 1997. Period 4 is from 1998 to 2005. And the last period is from 2006 to present. We can introduce the detailed information in every stages. China's reforming and opening policy began to implement, and the market of labor began to develop. Some farmers began to move to the city to make livings. For example, building. The farmer becomes a building works, the pitmans, the street peddlers. Most of them was temporary and casual works. At this stage, it was still difficult for most of farmers to move into cities. 30 years ago, I was very young. I remember that my mother brought me to the cities. I remember that we couldn't rent a hotel rooms because we had no letter of introduction from local government. So we had to stay in my mother's friend's house. At my mother's friend's house, I saw the electric lamp for the first time, so I always remember it. When I was hungry, I remember I want to buy some food, but my mother can't buy some food in the stores because we have no hukou and the national tickets, so we can't buy some food. At that time, hukou is very important for Chinese people. For example, if your children want to go to the schools in Michigan, you must have a hook of Michigan. For most of migration, they moved from the countryside to the city, but their hook was still in their hometowns. So it was very difficult for them to get a local government service, for example, education, social welfare, and the social securities. Of course, this policy had greatly changed. Maybe will consult over the next few years. This is at the first stage. At the second stage, more and more farmers moved into a local factory and become workers in eastern China because of the rise of non-state-owned company, such as rural townships enterprise in Jiangsu province. This is Jiangsu province, is near Shanghai's. This township enterprise had grown very fast. Private enterprises in Zhejiang province, also is near Shanghai's. Is the foreign enterprises in Guangdong province. Guangdong province is near Hong Kong's. I also worked in this province. Chinese province is like states in the USA, but much larger. There are 31 provinces in China, but it isn't includes the Hong Kong's and across China. It isn't include three regions. At this stage, a small number of migrants moved to the eastern region from Chinese inland countryside. The third stage, since the 1992, the Chinese reforming and opening had accelerated. The market economy rapidly developed, especially in eastern regions. There were enormous labor demands. So massive number of migrants moved to the city in eastern region from Chinese inland countryside. Maybe more than 25 million migrants had moved to the eastern cities. This picture is Guangzhou railway station after spring festivals. Guangzhou city is the third biggest cities in China. Because there is many migrants in Guangdong province. The migrants go to Guangdong province by trains, so you must get off in the Guangdong railway stations. So it's very crowded. At these stages, because of mass migration, the labor supply exceeded the demand in many eastern cities, which caused many social problems such as unemployment, crowded transportation, declines, labor protection, and labor conditions. At the fourth stages, since 1998, many state-owned companies began to reform and laying off workers who are now part of the unemployed. They also began to move to the cities in the east. As a result, in many eastern cities, social problems were increasing. This increasing rising unemployment, clients, crowded transportation, lacking labor protection, and poor labor conditions. At the fifth stage, the geographic trend of migration started to change. More and more migrants moved to the Chinese inland cities. The yellow field area, areas is Guangdong province, is Shanghai and Jiangsu, Zhejiang province, is Beijing and Tianjin Central Province. At the past, there are many migrants moved to 3 areas, but now the right field island is represent the new chain of migrants. Is a new chain. Also, more and more migrants are set down in the cities. The urbanization had been accelerating. The eastern cities began to experience labor shortages. How many migrants there were in China, it is difficult questions to answer. Many researchers, institutes, and government departments had estimated. The statistics on national population census and simple surveys was more accurate. This table shows the scale of migration is enormous. The census and simple surveys is very large peoples, a large number of peoples. About 1/3 of migrants was inter-province migrants.
Clarification question. What's the unit of population?
Unit.
10,000? 1 million or 10,000?
10,000.
10,000. Oh, 10,000. Oh, okay.
Yes, 10,000. Yes, yes.
One.
The inter-towns migrants is those people who moved to the other towns for 6 months. Inter-counties is moved to those people who moved to the other counties for 6 months. Is also for 6 months. Among the master migrants, about 1/3 of them migrate across province, and they mainly traveled from the central and the western region to eastern region, which is more developed. This table shows that the 52% of inter-province migrants had moved into the eastern region in 1987. Then the percentage had been increased. In 2005, the percentage was 84.6. But the migrants who had moved into central and western region had become decreased. The percentage was less than 10%. Most of migrants, about 70% or 8%, moved into six eastern provinces. It's Guangdong province, it's Fujian province, it's Zhejiang province, it's Shanghai, this is Jiangsu province, this is Beijing. From the structure of outflow area, the 65% of migrants were from 8 provinces. This is Anhui province, Henan province, Hubei province, Hunan province, Jiangxi province, Guangxi province, is Chongqing province, is Sichuan province. The main characteristics of labor migration. The first characteristic is the synchronization on inter-regions migration and inter-sector migration. This migration moved from underdeveloped regions to developed regions. They also from countryside to city, from agriculture to non-agriculture sector. This table shows that about 60% of all migrants was from countryside. Most of them moved into the cities. Most of labor who traveled from countryside was employed in the second industry, especially manufacturers, constructions. The table shows that nearly 70% of inter-regions labor was employed in the secondary industries. 22.17 was employed in the tertiary industries. But the structure of employment of inter-regions labor was different in 3 regions. In the eastern regions, more migrants was employed in the secondary industries. In the central regions, migrants was almost uniformly distributed across the 3 industries. In the west regions, more migrants was employed in the tertiary industries. This is the first characteristic. The second characteristic is circular migrants. The Chinese hooker policy had limited, but it has changed, and it is more accommodating of migrants. Many migrants had dual identity because they have moved and worked in the cities for many years. On the one hand, they still consider themselves farmers. They retained the franchise of land contracted, but they haven't owned the land. And their family, their parents, their children still living in the hometowns. They had to regularly come back home sometimes. For example, in the spring festival, in the harvest times, and they become circular migrants who split their years between the hometowns and infertile area. Most of the incomes earned in the cities is transferred to their family in the countryside. In many eastern cities, there was a lot of circular migrants. They have no permanent hookers in the city where they live and work. They plan on returning homes when they get older and retired. This is the second characteristic. The third is selective migration has emerged in the eastern region. According to the theory of development economics, many labor migration from underdeveloped region to developed regions to earn high wages, but only high-quality labor will find employed in developed regions, which may widen the gap of regional economy. The 5th Chinese census data shows that the average years of education of immigrants in the East was less than that in the Central and West regions. In the East region, it was 8.91 years, but in the Central and West region, it was more than 9 years. In contrast, the average years of education of immigrants in Eastern region was more than that in Central and Western regions. In the Eastern region, it was more than 10 years. Why it is happens? Since the end of 1990s, China's Eastern region gradually became a world manufacturing center. There were many labor-intensive industries and enterprises. They held both high-quality labor and low-quality labor. As a result, the average years of education of all migrants is small. On the contrary, many Eastern enterprises was more competitive and their products enter the market in the central and the western region. Correspondingly, many high-quality labor for project managing, marketing, and technical service moved from Eastern region to Central and Western regions. Part 4 is economic studies. At first we introduced the evolution of regional economic disparity in China. I used the coefficient of variance, COV, of per capita GDP, each province in China, which measures the level of economic disparity in China. This picture shows that the COV was gradually reduced from 1978 to 1990s, but it was increased from 1991 to 2005. It means that the graph of regional economy had narrowed from 1978 to 1990, but widened from 1991 to 2005. This table is the contrast of per capita GDP in 3 regions. The per capita GDP in Eastern region was also 100. We can also know that the gap of regional economy had been widened from 1990 to 2005. Had it into regional aggregation that caused this shift in regional economic disparity, which verified the hypothesis of new economics geography. Actually, it is difficult to estimate the impact of interregional aggregation on regional economic disparity because the gap of regional economy is a reason of aggregation. So it is difficult to solve the problems by the conventional method of economic checkers. To answer the questions, Taylor and Williamson proposed a new method. They asked another question: if there be no aggregation, what will have been the mentioned conventions? This study used this method. The labor is a producer and the consumer. On the one hand, more immigrants means more input factor, which is beneficial for the output. On the other hand, more immigrants may influence the per capitals.
Why?
Is more people, so per capita
larger denominator
is yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry. So the impact of aggregation to per capita GDP in inflow area and outflow area depends on the comparison of the aggregation elasticities of output and the aggregation elasticity of populations. Taylor and Williamson proposed a new method to estimate the two elasticity ones. We can quickly look for the method evaluations. This is three n's, theta and alpha. If we can instance n, theta, and alpha, we can get a result. I used population cancers and population sample surveys instead of n and thetas, and use the data from Chinese State Yellow Book instead of gammas. Then we get the result. The result shows that this is result in 1990s. This n and this number is every province, and this number gammas, the thetas. Is per capita GDP, per capita GDP in every province. This is actually per capita GDP in every month. This is if without aggregation, per capita GDP. We can look at the COV number. Without aggregation, COV is this number, but actually COV is this number. We can know the COV had been reduced because of the aggregation. This is the result in 2000. It's also we can look the COV's numbers. Look at the COV numbers. We can see the COV had also reduced because of the aggregation. If without aggregation, the COV is larger than the actual COVs. This 2005, this number is also the same deal, the same result. So the result shows that the inter-regional aggregation narrowed the gap of regional economy. In other words, the inter-regional aggregation caused the regional economy convergence. We can give explanations, the label in aggregation promotes the economic development in East region. At the same time, because of the more efficiently allocation of labor among regions, the region of migrants had been raised. This change bear a serious institutional factor like local policies. Most of migrants was able to work in Eastern City, but it was difficult to settle down there. So most of the earned incomes was transferred to their family in the central and western regions. This table is the amount of incomes transfers from in aggregation in eastern regions. This is per works incomes transfers. This is amount of labor falling into eastern regions. It's from central regions, it's from the western regions. This is incomes transfer from Eastern is to the Central regions, is to the Western regions. Some surveys shows that the incomes of migrants transferred was an important source of their family incomes, and the proportions was 40%. From my surveys and experience, migration had played a very important role on the improvement of living standards in many rural families. Thanks to the lot of incomes of migrants transferred in the net migration regions, for example, Central and Western regions, the growth rate of per capita consumption and per capita incomes increase greatly, which promotes regional economic development. As a result, the inter-region migration had caused a convergence. This is explanations. This last is the conclusions. Is four conclusions. The first is the China's inter-regional migration led to more efficient allocation of labor across regions, which was helpful in national economic growth. Number two is the Eastern region was a net migration region, and labor migration had promoted economic development in the Eastern region. At the same time, the range of incomes of migrants had been raised. The Central and Western region was the next immigration region, where many rural families of immigration benefits to the income transferred from the Eastern region. As a result, the growth of rate per capita consumer and per capita incomes had been increasing, which also promoted regional development. So the last is the Chinese inter-regional migration had caused the convergence and damages of regional economy. So we can say migration had brought great economic development, but it had caused some social problems. Maybe some social problem is very serious in China. So this is another question which need study further. This is my talk. Thanks everyone.
But thank you. Sarah, could you moderate the discussion?
Sure. So, right, so we'll take questions, and I'm just going to help make sure that Lianqing understands your question and that you understand his response. Just help facilitate that if necessary. Okay, so any questions?
I have two questions. The first question is, your data focus on a period from 1990s to 2005. I wonder, what's your take on the most recent years? That's because since early 2000, the government has spent a lot of resources in those inner provinces. The government realized this rural-urban inequality is so bad, get to the point that there are a lot of conflicts together with many mass incidents that influence the stability of the society. So after the mid-2000s, in the past few years, a lot of resources diverted to those inner provinces, and the government also encouraged workers residents from the eastern, more advanced provinces to those western central region. So I wonder, what do you think this will change the trend of migration in China and also the inequality among different regions?
Sorry, because because my listening and all English is good. I can reading and writing. I don't
Me too.
understand.
听不懂。
Yes, I don't.
我是说那个。
Sorry.
在2005年之后，不知道是怎么样子动态，因为那个2005年之后，中央政府不是有拨了很多资源到那个中西部，然后也鼓励大家多到中西部去开发发展。我就不知道说在那之后，最近几年这个趋势有没有改变？这种移民有没有改变中国的这种不同的区域差异？在最近几年，2005年之后。
This is another question. Is after 2005, I think my topic is from 1992 to 2005. I also researched after it is another result. It is because more Chinese policy had employed, so the regional economy is changed. So it's changed. Yes.
是因为是 smaller.
It's not. It's narrow.
Narrow.
It's narrow. Yes.
可是不是 but it's sorry, but it's not because of migration probably, right?
Yes.
So the regional gap is shrinking in the last few years, but probably due to policies that are different than migration.
Yes.
Can I ask the second question?
Oh, I'm going to let somebody else ask, but I'm going to come back to you because I'm sure you have
Maybe
another.
you can transfer for me because I can reading and writing, but I listening and all is poor.
You're going to get
Very
lots of
sorry.
practice today.
So China just had a large conference. I forgot the name. It's the third. Yeah. So do you know how anything have you heard anything in that conference or anything from home or anything like that that's going to change the outlook for where this population growth is going to occur? I don't know how to translate.
Sorry.
No.
Translation.
You mean where that will change the
So like
migration
the policies
trends?
that
Right.
they talked about this weekend, or have you heard about anything, or the future of China that's going to change where this migration is going to take place? Because I heard they're going to be building China's going to focus on building cities and filling these cities, but I don't know if I don't know much about the topic.
The conference also reported some loosening of the rules about migration.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
always do. Did you want to
No.
do you think I'll say it in English again, and then if you don't understand the English, we'll translate to Chinese. Do you think the policies are changing?
Policy is
Yeah,
changing.
right, especially right now. They have,
Scientific.
right.
This will at least has
现在
现在
就是他那个人问三中全会有没有新的政策会改变，这个你说的这个
maybe I read the news yesterday and I looked the policy, the hooker policy, maybe the first change policies after this conference.
你觉得他们真正改变这个，还是他们只是受？
Just now,
Right now,
this morning I looked at the news. Li Keqiang says every policy must implement. He says must implement.
He's very optimistic that the policies are going to change, especially the hukou policy, which defines the migrant population in China.
Yes.
So,
In many cities, the hooker policy is very loose. You can go to the city is very easy, but maybe 4 or 6 cities is conscious. For Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen city is very
What's that policy mean? Can you describe that? I guess I don't quite understand what that is.
optimistic.
But the
No,
POCO policy
the-
doesn't understand. It's basically like an internal passport system.
Uh-huh.
So if you want to move from city to city in China,
Mhm.
you have to, your passport is with your hometown. And when you move to the city, you have to register there as a migrant there. And then you can't become a permanent migrant. You have to, there's many things you have to,
Qualifications.
right. And so if you want healthcare or childcare, or you want your kid to go to school, it has to happen in your hometown.
So how long does it take to get that in a city like Shanghai or?
To get a temporary?
Not a temporary, to be a resident,
Oh,
like a.
maybe never.
Forever,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah, no.
Or maybe you can buy it.
If you're very-
Yeah, if you are very rich, you
millionaires.
become attractable immigrants. Well,
Uh-huh.
so,
There is many people in this city.
Yes, I understand, thank you.
I could follow up on that. The concern that's expressed by the press on the conference that just ended is that there are more people going into the cities than there will be jobs. And that they have lost, many of them have lost their ability to live from the farm. And this is going to create a large problem, according to many analysts. Is that likely to occur?
You can translate, please.
You can understand this part. So he said many people
Mm.
go to the city,
I see.
but there's not many jobs.
Yes.
So you have unemployment.
Yes,
And the migrant
migrant.
cannot return home to farm
Yes, yes.
or to earn money.
Oh, I see. According to economist of Total, he said if there are one job in the city, maybe there are 3 works will moved into city to look for a job. So many farmers and many immigrants from central or western region countryside to the eastern region, they look for the job because he hoped to look a good job. If he lived in the central and the western regions, he earned a little money, so he should move.
Will the farmers, those who move into the city and give up their grounds for their own care, will they receive some support from the government for the land that they lost, in a sense? They've lost the ability to use the land to serve their own family purposes, and they will have to be replaced in some way. And one way would be a monetary payment. I don't know whether that's true.
When they go, actually in China, when migrants move from the rural area to the city, they don't give up their land. Their land is being taken from them.
Yeah, okay.
But they don't give it up. And so when the land is being taken, there's lots of disputes over this process of expropriation. So really the kind of uprising and mass incidents are occurring because their land, actually in China, there's no private property. The
Yeah.
government owns the lands. The farmers own the land through collectives.
Yeah.
And what's happening is local states are taking the lands away from the collectives.
Yeah.
So it's not like urbanization in the Western world where when you leave the farm and go to the city, you sell the farm or get rid of the farm. That's not what's happening in China. The farmers still have that land, and technically they're supposed to be able to return home if they can't find jobs in the city. But what's happening is local governments can't fund what they need to fund, and the only way they can fund it is through taking those lands and then converting them into urban uses and selling them. And so that's where you're getting a lot of protests. Like 70% of mass incidents are because of expropriating land from farmers.
Is that likely to accumulate? Is that likely to be a large fiasco? This is my concern.
Can can add to that, and that's exactly the reason why the status of migrant workers is getting lower in the past 10 years. During the 1990s and to the mid-2000s, we said there might be three hierarchical layers in China. You have the urban, right, urban residents, you have the rural residents, and then you have migrants who still are able to earn money, send at home to improve their family back at home. So at that time, they're kind of in the middle. But now, many farmers think they are doing better compared to migrants, because migrants are in a very competitive job environment. They do not have all the health care, child care, education, yet, and also they do not have the land. But those farmers back at home, they can sell the land. I mean, they can. In domain cases, they could get a large sum of money from the government when government turn into business for this land or real estate purpose for this land. So for the migrants, they are kind of at the bottom of the society today, much lower status compared to even 10 years ago.
So we don't have any answers, but it definitely is a big social problem. Whether or not that's going to erupt into something more.
And that's why the third panel has been considering about land ownership, which is lies at the root of the kind of problem being discussed.
Oh, do you have a question too? I'm going to take him and then you're up
Yeah,
next.
sure.
Sorry.
Well, if the internal migration within China is between the rural and the city areas, and yet current policy wants to build more cities, why has the government been dealing with rural policies? Are rural policies only about land, or are they about the development of those areas where the people are living on farms? Is there a farm policy as well as a city policy, I guess is my question.
Are there, you can understand, are there strong rural policy, agricultural policy
Strong policy.
for farmers, for agriculture, to protect the farms and the farmers and the agricultural industry?
他说有一些保护措施。
不知道这个
But they have the three.
could you kind of repeat your question again?
Okay.
Actually,
Okay, if current policy is dealing with the urban regions and the cities, and then people are migrating to the rural area to the cities, and then there is this migration back and forth, is the focus then has been on the cities and why people are moving to the cities, but is there any policies dealing with the rural regions themselves? Is there a rural policy?
有没有什么农村政策？是不是？
应该是
现在是只是
some tax,
帮助城
tax
市。
Yes. There are many. After 2005, there are many policies for help to the farmers. But the farmer continue move into cities.
To try farming in the U.S.
But the farmer
So the farmers then they are essentially, in a sense, although they technically own the land because it's state property, but then they are in a sense landless, and they are moving into the city to get jobs, right, is my understanding. So they can get jobs, but they're sending that money back to the rural areas, right? So if they're sending their money to the rural areas, and these people are getting that money, I guess I'm saying is, do they sell their produce in the cities? How are the farmers living if all the money, they have their private farm. This is the way I'm understanding it. They migrate to the cities, they get a job. They get a better paying job or another job or to supplement their income. They send that money back to the city, to the rural areas where they have the money. Then that money how is it? Is it having it's affecting them? They're living better than they did before with that money.
Yes.
But what is happening in the region of the rural people? I mean, is the government saying, okay, we've been dealing with the cities, now what can we do to help the countryside? That's my
Well,
question.
it's, I think they've been doing something. They got rid of, kind of century-old agricultural tax to lessen the burden for the farmers.
And they also build the infrastructure in those rural areas, the highway, the railroad, so the transportation is more convenient.
They
And
did
so
a
I think
three-
because of the industry, they are concentrated on the east side. So the gap was too big at the beginning. So if you want to close that gap, it spends so much time and the resources. Because I think one thing I want to ask you is also, you only mentioned about the western and the central region, they benefit from the money translated from the city. Is there any other factor you can identify why the western region they will benefit from this inter-regional
Other
communication?
Could you say that in Chinese?
就是为什么西部的除了只得到了这个东部界外的钱，还有什么其他方式帮助西部的经济
This
增
is
长？
the most important is the China. In the beginning is the most important the income transfer, but many farmers into the eastern regions, they will get new ideas, becomes high qualities labels. They will some will come back hometowns. Some because they always come back hometowns. Maybe they give some new ideas, give some building some factory, building some factory in the hometowns. It is many inland cities hope to the high quality labels come back hometowns by building the factories is the most important.
I think Bonnie also mentioned some deliberate government policies, diverting resources to those regions. I think fiscal policy, kind of a policy to encourage, skilled, workers to at least spend some time helping out in those regions might also be important. But my question, could you kind of go back to one of your table results, 就是你的结果的那张表，I'm wondering about the mechanism, kind of showing the shrinking coefficient of variance. I mean, so who are the winners and the losers? Are you suggesting that the eastern cities could otherwise be even richer, but now they're being made poorer because of migration and otherwise, counterfactually, the western and central regions might have been poorer, without migration, right? And so I didn't get to read all the entries, but I was struck by the numbers for Tibet. Basically, it says, Tibet would have been richer without migration. Think about it. Okay, yeah. So the column for Tibet, 9128. So without migration, Tibet would have been better off, right? But actually, it's worse off. So so I'm kind of a little confused, but by the way, some of the Pinyin translation of the Chinese words was not very correct. For Tibet, for Heilongjiang, Yunnan, and others, you might have to check the Pinyin first. But I'm kind of wondering, and it would be helpful if you could group the different regions together and give an average for inland, for central, for western, for eastern. So kind of okay. Think about the story for Beijing is kind of okay. Yeah, Beijing would have been even richer without migration, right? But now it's only 45,000. It would have been 50,000. But how about others? Think about Fujian, the same story. Guangdong, Guangxi. But how about Tibet? How about or is Tibet exceptional? Or even think about Guizhou, one of the most poorest inland provinces, right? So your table says Guizhou would have been richer or poorer. Okay, okay, now it's better. Okay, Guizhou is actually consistent. Yeah. So now I've been wondering. Probably, yeah, Tibet is exceptional because of its kind of a minority kind of.
I have two questions to follow up on that. One is the covariance, the coefficient of variance. In your early slides, you showed us that some of the migrants from 8 provinces go to 3 provinces. So why include all the provinces? Why not run your calculations on those provinces to see? Because I'm afraid the results will be weakened if you include all province. 如果你知道从这个农村人从这些 province 他们跑到这3个地方，为什么不就是用这个 provinces？ 为什么用所有的？But so that's my first question. 还有另外的问题。It seems your solution, your conclusion is that the hukou policy is very good because they send money home and it helps narrow the gap. But without hukou policy, maybe the migrants will not send money home and the gap will not be narrowed.
At the beginning, at the initial stage,
they could just move.
Right. And they can, 如果没有户口，他们会把家里
全部带到。
Yes. This study is these conclusions.
That the hukou is good.
In the national stage, is a good ways to narrow the gap.
Okay.
In the national stage.
Well, maybe it's not that hukou is good. It's you know the practice you know is good given the circumstances, given the constraints of hukou, right? Maybe without hukou system, things could have been even better, right? As you know, the migration and you know mobility would encourage even larger convergence. Probably that's the reason. Wouldn't probably few would argue actually that's the hukou policy causing the convergence. Right? It's the you know the fact that they're still able to migrate and work and then send money back.
Right, but his argument is that it is causing convergence at the initial stage, but most of the argument
it's
not.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, we will end it here. Thank you. There's lots of interesting stuff that can be asked and talked about, and you can see it's going to devolve into debates. But thank you everybody for coming and for your questions.
Can I have a minute with you?
Okay.